All right, guys, and welcome back. So we just discussed the centrifuge blockchain, Tin Lake, and centrifuge chain that make the centrifuge concept as a whole, and we talked about the invoice financing, what it is, and I hope you read up about that a little bit more. So now we're gonna dive deeper in what exactly centrifuge is and what it does. All right. So centrifuge, in my opinion, is a very much needed was a very much needed piece in the decentralized financial stack, where, as discussed before, where we make these bridges into more traditional and more centralized financial applications, like uh, the console flight that uh, you saw in the article I linked below, and you will also see now in the proof of concept that MakerDAO together with Centrifuge has been built. So everything in NFT. Using Centrifuge chain, business can convert real-world assets into non-fungible tokens. So what that means, actually similar to how that happened in the art exchange, I can now take something from the real world. I can take my, not that somebody would do that, but I can take my coffee from the broccoli revolution, and I can actually embed that on chain. It's of course a stupid concept, but let's think about how you would do that. Well, you would have to go to a central party and then have to say, well, this cup of coffee is in this vault or this stays here. Okay, I give that to that central party. Then that central party would make an agreement on chain that actually is there, and so they're legally liable to have that real world asset or that real world agreement in their vaults or in their possession. And then you make a token of it, and then you can inject that token into the DeFi space, and you can use it for arbitrage or for different. You can get liquidity. You can start trading with it. You can start making a secondary market with that token. So these are all very interesting concepts that we're going to look into a little bit more. Looking into this stack, you can see there is a protocol for sharing data. So this is the stack in their own that they have created to make this bridge possible. There is there's a single source of truth where all parties store the state of the NFT, and this happens on the Polkadot chain. We will go in depth into that later in a bit. And they have also they tokenize the documents, make the NFTs, etc. And this also syncs back to the Polkadot chain. Then there is Tin Lake, which is a smart contract, partially on Polkadot and on Ethereum, where they create non-fungible tokens of the real-world assets that they have socked up into the centrifuge chain. Then this can go into DeFi protocols to access liquidity, etc., etc. Okay, so how does this work a little bit deeper, right? So we can see this really beautifully illustrated in this image here. We have the Ethereum chain, right? So we have the Ethereum chain where the NFTs are originated, where we get the liquidity, we get the finance and DeFi adapters. So here we have the liquidity side, and here we have the NFT side, and this happens on the Ethereum chain. And there you get the lenders of DAI and Drop, and Drop is one of part of the centrifuge token model, and they provide the liquidity to Tin Lake. Then the borrower can borrow money, can borrow liquidity out of Tin Lake, use that liquidity for financing of their own production or their own factories or their own workers. Then they mint the token to the centrifuge chain, and the centrifuge makes an NFT of their underlying and creates that in a bridge to Ethereum. Let's look a bit deeper in that last part, because that was actually a little bit fast, right? So I think we understand now the person with the liquidity with DAI or Ethereum or Bitcoin, whatever, can provide liquidity. Then the borrower, the asset originator, can get the liquidity. So let's take my business for example. I have a Yeah, we first should start here at the business part, right? So I have a business. I work with Tencent. Tencent pays me 60 days after I do the work, which is annoying as a producer, as a worker. So what I do, I take that invoice. I say I have this invoice here. A third-party service actually keeps that invoice, checks if it's actually a real invoice. There's a paying history because Tencent already is paying me for like 6 months. I put that invoice on the blockchain. I create an NFT of that invoice. I mint the NFT tokens. I connect my company identity to that. And this all happens on the Polkadot blockchain. It's a bit more flexible. Basically, on the Polkadot blockchain, you are able as a company to spin up your own blockchain. And that's what Centrifuge did. So using Polkadot substrate, which we will look into later, they basically created their own blockchain with their own validator. This is kind of like a DPoS version of a blockchain, and they make sure that there is a single source of truth, and they have probably some special parameters that are not really possible with Ethereum as of today. And I also think maybe Ethereum shouldn't have all the possibilities that Centrifuge chain has. Again, this shows this multi-chain universe we've been talking about. Then the NFTs get with a bridge. The NFTs that are created on substrate Polkadot are bridged over into Ethereum. We have here the NFTs, and then we go into the cycle where the liquidity providers actually give me the DAI, and Tinlake can also make it so that instead of DAI, I receive dollars into my account, right? So all in all, I have an invoice, I put it on the blockchain, I create an NFT, and I get money for it. That's it. All right, so here is more of like the inner workings of how that exactly works under the hood. So NFTs are created, then ERC20 tokens. ERC20 tokens are the liquidity. They lend the DAI, I get the DAI, and that whole circle continues over and over again. Here, that goes a little bit more deeper into the inner workings of Centrifuge. On the high level is always a little bit more easy to understand, and in the lower level, you can see that when the borrower, like when my business gives the invoice and I create the NFT of that invoice, I get DAI. On that back end, there's actually one part of it probably will a maker CDP, so you can open up a CDP and mint drop tokens, and there is these are the more senior investors that do that. And then you have the junior investors that just provide a stable token and they get tin for it. The difference in that is that the junior investors have a little bit of a lower interest rate and the senior investors have a higher interest rate. But when something goes wrong, because let's say there is a default rate, meaning default rate means the percentage of people that don't actually pay back their loan, then the senior investors will be hit first, and then after that, the junior investors. So there's a certain risk profile or certain risk that you can trade as investor. And I think this concept is amazing, and this is really a game changer for DeFi and decentralized finance. And this will be a concept, if you are getting now deeper into DeFi, this is a concept you need to understand. And this is a concept you need to go deeper into. All right, so let's look at what is the status today. The world is moving very fast, especially also the DeFi world. So when I was making these slides, this was the status. This, I think, is a week ago. And I have also an article I linked below that they did the first proof of concept some time ago. And you can actually inspect that. If you go to their website, let's do that quickly. If you go to their website, you can see the different pools. If we click on one of the pools, you can see all the different invoices that are integrated here. Outstanding DAI, $17,000. You can see the APR. It's a 15% loan that is originated. Yeah, so you see here. So if I actually give my DAI into this pool, I get a 15% interest rate on it. And there's a danger that this company will not pay back, but the danger is actually relatively small. And this is basically also how banks make money with your money. And that's why you shouldn't accept that and try to figure out these things a little bit more by yourself. Also, since this is very fresh, so this is of the 26th of May, this recording is the 30th of May. And yeah, as you can see, they actually went to mainnet. So they're moving really fast. And they're also created a pack chain pilot. So they also launched a second pilot. Before the first and second pilot, they also did the one pilot number 0 before that, and where they actually tokenize royalties. So they tokenize Spotify royalties on chain, so that you can actually have a stake in a certain artist or a singer, and then when their songs get really popular, you actually gain money out of that. So that's also interesting concept to read in the description below. All right, so the technology stack of Centrifuge, it's actually really interesting and fascinating how they have constructed their chain. It really fits into this philosophy and the way I think the blockchain space will be moving. I believe that we move towards a multi-chain universe, a multi-chain space where there's a lot of different ecosystems all working together and all interconnected with their own specialities. We have the maximalist, but I believe more in a open universe of collaboration and progression. And you can also see that Centrifuge has a similar approach. Yeah, so at the same time, and so they're developing the Polkadot substrate ecosystem, but they're also developing the Ethereum and Ether ecosystem. And on top of that, they would, I think, also plug into different chains where different liquidity is accessible, because at the end of the day, that's the most important part of the game. All right. So Substrate, in a nutshell, here we can see Substrate is basically Polkadot. So the Centrifuge built their product using Substrate, and Substrate is from Polkadot, and Substrate is also partly financed by Ethereum. And what it does, it lets you as a user very easily set up a own chain. And this actually can function as a side chain of Ethereum. This can function as a separate chain on itself. This can function as a only side chain for Polkadot. So the interesting thing about this is that you are basically chain agnostic. So your architecture of your software stack will be chain agnostic, and you will have also a modular approach where you more easily can integrate different aspects in your chain. And it's especially important when you're building these bridges into like the traditional financial world, where you also need to integrate again with a lot of different parties. And then in a DeFi world, also you need to integrate with different parties. And when we use Substrate, basically that integration comes right out of the box. So all these bridges and all of these compatibilities are already taken care of in your stack. I've listed a nice article about Substrate in the article in the links below. And here is Gavin. He was sitting in Berlin, and I was actually also myself present there when he was first launching its own Substrate blockchain in 5 minutes. So on stage, Gavin, there's videos of that as well, was launching its own blockchain within 5 minutes. It's a interesting video to watch, and also very educational to see how he did that. All right. So also, if we now look into like the progress as discussed before, you can see that there is like a lot of progression. So if you now go to the Centrifuge threads on the MakerDAO forum, you can see that they're actually trying to push for their token being adopted into the multi-collateralized DAI pool. So that means that when I tokenize my invoice for 10 cents, which I might do that, then that will be actually backed by DAI and be connected to the MakerDAO pool, which is super fascinating and interesting. Yeah, so Centrifuge is evolving asset financing for the fintech world, right? So it makes the world more bankless, it makes the world more liquid, and it makes the world more flexible. Right, guys, so this was Centrifuge. Centrifuge is quite of an in-depth topic, and the most interesting part about it is that you can get involved. You can, like, try to see where you can implement this technology stack and implement it, and then try to use it yourself, because then you can also make a career out of this. You can make a lot of money with this if you find a niche where this technology is suitable. Yeah, so as an assignment, next up, we were now done with this category. In the assignment, I want to encourage you and motivate you to discuss with me in the forum about how you see centrifuge evolving, how you see art exchange evolving, and maybe which other protocols you see out there in the real world with, real world assets on the blockchain. And I want to encourage you to also interact with some of these protocols. Right now, we can buy some wine on the blockchain. Let's interact. Let's start use it. Huh? Let's make real world assets on the blockchain the new normal moving forward. I'm looking forward to discuss these topics with you on the forum, and I'm also looking forward to see your real world assets being purchased on a blockchain. Thank you, and see you in the next presentation.